Welcome to Viking.TV, and today we're going to be in the gardens, and where better place to start than the wildflower meadow. It runs down the slope to the south of the castle, and Geordie and I began to create this some 10 to 12 years ago now, and it gains in strength every year. I have got with me Stella and Freya, who are Finza, Karina Hagen, Finza's puppies, and Alfie, who's Finza's brother, who's looking forward to going back to finding some sandwiches by the kitchens a little bit later, or perhaps some scones. So what's in our wildflower meadow? Well, it changes over the season, offering ever more diversity. From the cornflowers, which are here in front of me, which are now beginning to come into flower. There's some sainfoin. One of the key plants is yellow rattle, which is a small yellow plant which grows throughout, and that's a very important plant for insects, animals, and for the life and depth of the wildflower meadow. There's wild thyme. There's lady's bedstraw, which actually was supposed to repel moths, and you could use it in your mattress. I think perhaps Alfie's trying it out. And then through the middle of the wildflower meadow, we've got the most beautiful path for everyone who comes here to walk along. It was used a little bit in Downton Abbey, and it comes to fruition really in July and August, and they'd often finished filming about then. And of course they have again. They're now ready to wrap and edit for the next film. So you're going to have to rely on this video and coming here for yourself in the future to see the real beauty of it. At the end of the season, it then turns brown with lots of heads on the wildflowers, and we harvest it and we sell the seeds in the gift shop. So I hope always innovative. But I'm now going to walk along this path and take you into the Wood of Goodwill. Apart from the diversity of plant, of whether it's a buttercup or an oxeye daisy or the yellow rattle which is here, this wildflower meadow offers so much to the beetles, the insects, to the rare butterflies, some of whom only can live off one specific plant which grows on these chalk downlands. It's very busy and very noisy, and a magic place to come and sit and pause and stare. I've walked through here to the Wood of Goodwill. Again, this is a new area of the garden which Geordie and I created, or began to create, some 12 or 15 years ago. The central axis is this avenue of beech trees, some of which were first planted here in about 1740. Others have then died off, and we have replanted to create this axis through the Wood of Goodwill, which is then divided into spring, summer, autumn and winter in terms of planting, the 4 seasons. So that's our theme. Over here you can see some circles filled with Philadelphus, white and just scented, and a real marker of summer, and they are something actually for everybody's garden. In the middle of the avenue here we've actually left the grass long, and that's because over the last year in particular we found some very rare bee orchids and other native British orchids have come back, and they've begun to proliferate in this area once more. It is a joy to see them. We hope that every year there'll be ever more, and it'll be a real pleasure for people to come here and try and spot them. This Wood of Goodwill then links back through 2 archways into the secret garden. So I think that's where I would love to show you next. Come on. This is a beach archway which I made and had the ironwork made to support the arches going across, to create a view through to the Wood of Goodwill. I love creating views, hiding things, putting them in. And we're a chalk soil, so beech do so well here. And I'm actually trying to introduce more and more different native species of beech so we can, in the end, look towards a national collection. And this is the way to the secret garden. Not very secret, is it? I'm showing you. The secret garden is not really very secret because I've shown you where it is. It was actually played its part in the film The Secret Garden, which was one of Maggie Smith's first ever roles here. This garden was created by the 6th Earl of Carnarvon and in about the 1960s. This was his contribution to garden life here. And it is the place where we really work on the borders, and it's a typically English garden with wide, deep borders and a variety of annuals and perennials taking you through the year. Some of my favourite plants are the roses, and the pink rose that I stopped to smell on the way is called Rosaria de Lay. It is an extraordinarily beautiful rose with the most wonderful scent. I mentioned Philadelphus, and I've just again picked a sprig of Philadelphus. It is the most beautiful scent. And I think it's a plant for everybody's garden. I'm standing here in between 2 incense cedar trees, which I think are Italian. And as the weather warms up, there's some scent on their bark or their needles, which is enticing as you walk from one of the garden rooms through to the next. You can hear behind me a hedge cutter, so it is a little bit noisy, but it's a real working garden here, and it is never not busy. It takes 4 of us, I think, 4 gardeners to keep it looking as it does. But there's an awful lot of other acres for them to look after as well. My husband Geordie loves delphiniums and I love roses. I love some of the geraniums, and I've read a lot of Gertrude Jekyll's garden, so there's some of her key plants also mark your path through the gardens. So I hope it looks like the most exuberant profusion of colour, and then as you get nearer, of scent as well, and something to entertain visitors throughout the summer. We've also introduced earlier spring bulbs and flowers, and we have a sort of spring time-lapse approach to planting. So I hope whatever time visitors come, whatever time I can share it through social media, there's something wonderful to see, and I think it's really good for our souls. I'm going to take you through here to a beautiful part. It's the white border. Who doesn't like this extraordinary, peaceful concoction of green background and white flowers throughout the year? Come on, you lot. Are you ready? From the secret garden, you come out into the south part of the old monk's walled garden. In fact, the origins of this particular wall and area go back certainly to the 13th century, and there's records at about 1216 of 61 apples and pear trees planted within this space. The wall was not quite as high then, but it was high enough to keep out deer and rabbits, so there was orchards and herbs and food for those living here at that time to eat. The wall was then built up later on in the 18th century, and the 2nd Earl of Carnarvon created a more Italianate garden in here, planted the yew hedges, and then changed and created some arches in some of the walled garden wall itself. But here we're in one part divided from the main part of the walled garden to the secret garden by this huge tall yew hedge. And the dark green denseness of the yew provides a wonderful backdrop for all the white flowers in this area. So this white border was begun by my parents-in-law, and George and I have continued it with much admiration and love for what they've done. We've now got some obelisks with white roses growing up. They're called Long John Silver. Sometimes I buy for the names, or sometimes because the white roses grow from the bottom to the top. There's white alliums, geraniums, white putticilla, lilies. Smells and scents walk with you along the border. Geordie's favourite tall delphiniums, and my mother-in-law's favourite cranber. Ah, now that plane has got Louis in it, our butler. He's gone for a flyby for a birthday present for me. That is such fun. We know so many amazing men in their flying machines. Steve Bohill-Smith, who's flying him, was actually a Concorde pilot. He has so many hours and so much experience, and he now thoroughly enjoys flying vintage airplanes. And in this case, his passenger is Louis Coelho, Highclere's amazing butler and banqueting manager. Walk round the yew hedge and you're coming back into the old space of the monk's garden, which has been here for centuries. In honour of its heritage, if you like, there is still fruit trees planted all around against the walls, medlars and fig trees. In the middle of it you've got the topiary and the arches, which were put there by the second Earl of Carnarvon, and then they're mirrored by the brick arches leading towards the castle. So they're always tempting you to walk in that direction. There's a long Victorian peach house in which we still grow white peaches just behind me. And in front of that, we call it the peach house bed. And it's full of texture. Throughout the year, it's got fennel, snapdragons, yuccas, euphorbias, blues and purples with some whites and lighter colours, my husband's favourite delphiniums. And then later on, it has many different asters and dahlias. It's hopefully a wonderfully peaceful area for people to come and sit. And in the middle of the green grass are mulberry trees. There was a quince tree here, which, as you can see, we had to take down. And I'm thinking I might replant it with a mulberry tree, which would again have been grown here 500 or 600 years ago. So I'm walking in space and time. So I hope you'll go with me up towards the castle. Come on, you two then. Lavender's planted thickly around the edge of the wall garden. It is such an important aid to sleep. It's also one of the ingredients in our gin, and it's also one of the ingredients making an excellent cocktail called the Lavender Lady. And it just looks so pretty at the end of it. I think it's another must-have plant, as well as the Philadelphus, for every garden. Or just a pot of lavender on your window. It just says sunshine, summer and peace. We're going to go this way, behind the scenes, where visitors can't normally go, to have a look at what goes on to make the gardens look so beautiful. Behind the north wall of the monk's garden are all the coal frames and evermore garden buildings. There would have been far more in the past. We still have a vinery. That one's called the Metal House. There's another one called the Carnation House further up, and then the Orangery. So these all have existed in this part of the garden for a long time. And behind them, we've now replanted our vegetable garden and put in some raised beds, because we thought that might be a wonderful way to discover how to grow vegetables, listening to some of our gardeners and asking them questions. Now, the coal frames are one of my favourite places. I buy in plants when they're not so big and not so expensive, and we grow them on, and then we can plant them out. So over here, I've got some little small plants, and anything which is too much, we can sell on. So this is the campanula white clips, a small low-growing plant for the front of any bed. Next door to it are some gaura. I love these plants. They come in both white and a pinkier shade. And they're the whirling butterfly plants. That's their more common name. And they do very well apart from in hard frosts. So it's a matter of always growing them on and then planting them out. We've actually planted out a huge number of plants here, but now we can see what we can do with some of the ones that are left. This end, I have got some hydrangeas, I know, and some Russian sage, and some more Philadelphus. So some of them will grow to expand some of the circles in the Wood of Goodwill. There are some dahlias here, which I think we just bought for the name, because it's called Happy Days. So this is a Happy Day dahlia. Amazing coloured leaves with a great foil for the yellow flower. Make you smile for sure. Lupins, I love lupins because also deer don't like lupins, so they're safer to grow in many places. This one's called Noble Maiden. There's another one called, I think it's called the Castle, and there's another one called Chatelaine, so we buy them for the name. Here I've got some fuchsias, and the fuchsias we put in the middle of many of our displays in planters. So they flower for so long during the summer, and then around them you can put some other lower growing flowers to tumble over the sides of the planters. Yet to be planted out. Honeysuckles. If I plant a rose, I'll often plant a honeysuckle or a clematis alongside it because that gives much longer interest. Now you always need tall spires, and these are fantastic tall spires, which are Veronica astrum. So now that wasn't very clever because that didn't have a tall spire on it, but that does. Aren't they really beautiful and pretty? So they will again go out into borders, and any which we don't need, we sell off on our plant store. So it's all about recycling, using and not wasting. If you look over here, you can see the original brick of this old garden. Because when it was first built, it was built out of flint and stones. You can see down here with different courses in it. And it was clearly this high. So this was extended round about 1803 because it was grander and more important if you had a taller wall. Bricks were very expensive. There was a brick tax, and each of them were handmade, not mass-produced like today. So it was a matter of status as well, having a walled garden beautifully made with many bricks with the coping stones on the top, which, as you can see, there's always a need to repair. But Rome wasn't built in a day, so it's an ongoing process. I think I might show you our vegetable gardens around the back here. Hope you'll come with me. We've re-fenced our vegetable area here, and we've put in some raised beds, and I think made it a heck of a lot smarter and somewhere which we can come and share with our visitors. Our gardeners have such knowledge, and I thought that people in small groups might really enjoy learning how they plan to grow the different series of vegetable crops or berries that we are going to carry on growing here. I hope it'll be a bit of fun. It's a very smart fence which should keep out all deer and all rabbits, so there is something to eat at the end of the day. Now I'm going to finally take you to our herb garden, which looks back to the heritage of Highclere, to the herb garden that would have been beside the monk's garden 300 or 400 years ago, and we've repositioned and replanted a new one nearer to the castle, which again we hope is nearer to those who can't perhaps walk so far, and is there for us also to pick the herbs which we can use in the kitchen for our culinary triumphs. So welcome to the herb garden. This was something that Geordie and I created maybe about 5 years ago, and it's a nod back to the heritage during the monks' tenureship of Highclere. The bishops of Winchester owned Highclere for 800 years, and they definitely had a herb garden as well as an orchard. So I thought it'd be fun to create a herb garden quite near the castle, somewhere easy for people to visit after they've had a cup of tea. And then around the herbs, describe how they can increase our immunity and better our health. So in the middle here, we've got some lavender for sleep. And there's a sundial, which says in Latin, omnia tempus habent, which is to everything there is a season. A beautiful bit from Ecclesiastes in the Bible. And then round and about, we've got various different herbs to help you feel better when needed. I'm sure you're perfect. Fennel, sorrel, lovage, which is very good for digestion. Verbascum with little hairy leaves, very helpful if you've got a tickly cough. Angelica, sweet woodruff, thyme, sage. So there's a Roman saying that a man who grows sage can never grow old. I'm quite sure it applied to women as well. There's some borage, lemon balm, just different herbs for tisanes, for cooking. Rosemary. Rosemary is wonderful. It's an uplifting herb. Fantastic with lamb. But again, you can also just have a little bit in a tisane in hot water for a tea. So it is absolutely charming. And I hope gives much pleasure. I thought I'd return to the herb garden, to a really peaceful spot next door to the lavender and the sundial, to answer some of your questions. So thank you so much for submitting them. So Hannah, do you want to ask me them?
Yes, Lady Carnarvon, Reuben from Idaho would love to know what is your favourite plant or flower in the gardens.
Oh wow, Reuben from Meadow, thank you so much for the question. It's a completely invidious choice. I mean, obviously I've made a rose arbour in memory of my mother, and there are roses growing up trees against buildings, alongside walls, and perhaps that's a plant or a shrub, whatever form it takes, that I'd find it very hard not to include in any garden. Another plant I love is Philadelphus, which is a wonderful summer white flowering, large often shrub, and the scent just draws you. You suddenly find this faint scent on a summer breeze, and you have to follow it to see what's at the end of it. Equally well, the lavender and the herbs, they give us so much, help in terms of our diet and our health, our immunity, and from the verbascum and the fennel to the lavender in front of me. A very difficult choice. At least you haven't asked me about the trees. I don't think I could choose that either. Is there another question?
Yes, Diane at Palm Springs would love to know how old the gardens are.
Diane, thank you very much for your question. Well, here I've written a book about it. It's coming out in September, Seasons at Highclere. The earliest records are perhaps the monk's garden in 1216. And the gardens were not necessarily just for leisure as we think of them today. They were also for growing things, for horticulture, for growing herbs, for the produce that was needed to feed the inhabitants of this home, such as the building was at the time. So they are old and stretch back in time. So certainly to the 13th century, but in some ways there were perhaps some Roman villas here after the time of the Iron Age hill fort, and they would also have had gardens and places to grow the food that they need, and in a sense there was perhaps less differentiation between what you grew to look at and what you grew to add to what you were cooking. And perhaps there's less, today we seem to divide it up a little bit more, but there was less division in the past, I think.
And finally, Paula from Nevada would like to know whether the gardens were used in Downton Abbey.
Oh, Paula, thank you. Well, obviously you love Downton Abbey, I'm sure, like so many other people in the world. In fact, I think at least 300 million people have watched Downton Abbey, Paula. But yes, they were used in Downton Abbey. They were used, and they were often pretending they were somewhere else. So Dame Maggie, or as the Dowager Countess of Grantham, and Mrs. Crawley, Penelope Wilton, used to sit in the secret garden having cups of tea on a bench surrounded by hydrangeas sometimes. And we used to wait for Maggie Smith's latest words of wisdom. They walked through the wild flower meadow. Of course, in some ways, the lawns and the setting are the arrival story for so much of the TV show, and of course the film began with the most beautiful drone shot on a glorious autumnal morning as I think it was a motorbike delivering a letter with some very exciting news heading towards the castle. So I always think the setting, the space around the castle, the trees and the gardens are as important to us all, certainly to us as a family, as the castle itself. There are layers of history. It's a privilege and a responsibility to live here. I feel very lucky, particularly in some of these terrible times that we've had, to be able to walk out across the lawns and underneath the trees. And I hope many of you from Viking will again join us on your pre and post cruises in the future. We look forward to seeing you.